right. Well, you mentioned discussion. Let's have one. I got what I was looking for because I certainly like the social media interaction that you guys provide. I like a good victory lap on social media. So I take debate off, and it's good to know that it's good to know that we have a show that qualifies. Obviously, we have our standard metrics here. Obviously, in the States, Apple Podcasts is big, and everyone just in the industry kind of seeks out their mysterious algorithm just to see. I mean, the optics are just so great for social media sharing.
Yeah,
so
of course.
You go to see where you're at, and thankfully your algorithm kind of reflects theirs, and we can keep things kind of uniform. But I like the social media interaction and how you guys tally that and how it's weighted across your overall algorithm. I find that very interesting.
It's been working well, and from a discovery perspective as well. That conversation we think is key in new people listening to you guys and everyone across the show. Let me ask you some you guys and the show questions. Neither of your names are in the title. Was my first bit. Before I speak to anyone on this, obviously there's a lot of podcasts. So I tend to sort of do an intensive course. So I've had you guys in my ears for the last sort of 48 hours. So now it's really cool to be able to put a face to the name. I've got a WhatsApp group with a load of American buddies. And, I said, do any of you listen to this show? And one of them, Nate from New York, I should probably name check him, pipes up and was like, oh my God, it's my favorite podcast. I can't believe you're speaking to those guys. This is amazing. So I said, cool, tell me everything. Like that you guys have a big story and it's kind of tough to wrap your head around. And I reckon half the people that will watch or listen to this will be people that will never have heard of you. They're probably in Australia or wherever else. And half of them will be your fans. So somewhere between the two, we want to sort of get the story and get a bit of, extra about you guys. So he gave me a couple of things. I've done this in the past. This either backfires spectacularly and one of you hangs up the Zoom call, or this segues nicely into the show. He said to me, he was actually sent a cameo of Stu for his birthday, which completely made him up. I don't know what that's. Apparently, people make fun of Stu's mum dying on the regular, which is a thing. And his overall description, I don't know if this is a legit one or one that he's come up with, but effectively you all assembled as a crew he described as freighted refugees in shipping containers.
That's a shipping container filled with frightened refugees. Yeah.
Oh, is that an official description? Is that
yeah? You're talking to two of them. So like our name isn't in the show, but the show is obviously an ensemble group, and it's kind of late in the game to change the name of the show and put anybody else's name in it. But yeah, you're talking to two tried and true members of the shipping container filled with frightened refugees. That harkens back to our initial unflattering camera angle when we first started being simulcast over Fusion, which is no longer a network.
Yeah, you. So this is bigger and longer than podcasting, even, isn't it? The sort of collection of you guys.
Yeah, well, we started to give you some history of the show, and yes, we do make fun of Stugotz's mom dying, and yes, Stugotz will never fulfill many cameos. So shout out to Nate. Thank you for listening. I appreciate it. The show's history started roughly about 20 years ago as a standard, a conventional sports talk radio show out of South Florida. However, quickly after the show found its footing, there was nothing conventional about the show. It really tapped into a hardcore fan base and was more interactive than most shows and didn't really have time for callers unless the callers were funny. Much better guests. It wasn't so much, hey, let's talk about the Dolphin game anymore. It was about cracking jokes and saying so-and-so looks like they smell like cigarettes. Vladi looks like he smells like cigarettes. And playing all these games and having these threads and really making it a show based off of personalities as opposed to the topics that they were talking about, which was pretty revolutionary for not just this market, but really the medium. No one was really doing a spoof of a sports talk radio show. Now, there would be good sports talk conversation, but sometimes it's the off season. You can only talk about the Florida Marlins so many times when we started. So it would be really a comedy show. And over time, after initial pushback and, whoa, this is so different, it had a real cult following, and then it became the standard for South Florida radio. We became a national show about 10 years into our run locally, and we still had a local component because South Florida, we still have a local component. We have a podcast that's dedicated just really for South Florida, but the rest of the nation enjoys it. But Miami, this show is built by Miami, and it's important to us. We started on ESPN, which is the leader here. It's like Sky over in the UK. It doesn't have much of an imprint over there, but here it's the industry standard for sports. And we became the weird afternoon radio show, and once again got hit with a bunch of resistance. Who are these guys? This stinks. I will talk about the game last night, and slowly but surely we'd win people over. Now, the undercurrent to all of this is we really always put a premium on our digital audience. We would, back in the days of live streaming the show, we would do live stream shows during commercial breaks and cater to people that would consume us digitally. We always had the podcast in mind. We had to save the podcast because it was eating up so much bandwidth that our parent company, when we were local, couldn't actually house the podcast anymore, and they wanted to kill it. Well, we brought in a sponsor, and we fought for it. That original RSS feed is the RSS feed that you see today as we're independent. We fought to keep that throughout the entire 15 years we've been posting podcasts, and we've always put that first, or at least I've always championed it first. And here we are several years later as exclusively a podcast company under an agreement with DraftKings, which is a daily fantasy leader here in the United States, and expanding into traditional sports books over there. It's had several twists and turns. We ascended up to the top show at ESPN Radio. We were simulcast on several networks. Things went a little sideways. We became free agents. There was a mutual parting of ways. And now here we are at the end of our pirate phase, where out of pocket, we just kept the momentum of the show going. We stopped our show the first week of January. That first Monday was our final show on ESPN. We maintained our RSS feed. We built out an entire infrastructure. We kept the studio, had to remove all the ESPN infrastructure, built out a whole new infrastructure. And my friend Chris Wittyngham, who worked with me as an intern back in the radio days, as my producer and co-host on my Chelsea podcast, Chelsea Mic'd Up, I was asked, what do you need to make sure we can put out a show the very next day? I'm like, give me Chris Wittyngham and give me Alex Tyner. And we built out this digital infrastructure. And he could tell you about how we've soared beyond ESPN and becoming perennially, I think for the most part, over the last 4 months, 70% of the time we're number one. We're always in that top three. It's a real success story and a testament to the fans that went ahead and found us and changed their listening habits.
Chris, I'm going to ask you in a second about the that day. But let me tell you, when you talk about your stats, do you know with your stats, they didn't even bother sending me most of the sports stats because they were boring. They just sent me the sort of all genre encompassing chart numbers that you guys do. It's perhaps a testament to you saying this isn't a conventional sports show, but you're doing the podcast charts. You're not just doing sports. I mean, that's unique still, right?
Yeah. If you look at historically sports podcasts, especially in the United States, and I don't need to tell you or your audience over the last 4.5 to 5 years we've had over here, politics rule the conversation. That's what really moved the needle when it comes to podcasting. And you see really well-performing podcasts on the right side of it. People seek out, they know what they like and they want to hear their beliefs reaffirmed. And they don't typically do that with sports. They don't really have, I mean, they have beliefs of their own and they kind of feel like they're set there. They'll probably, if they're concerned about the Miami Hurricanes, they'll seek out an individual Miami Hurricanes podcast, and that has a ceiling to it. But then there are a certain number of podcasts that were exclusive podcasts their entire time. Like Bill Simmons, a great show. Part of My Take, a great show. They really built out their audience in digital, and it's becoming more of a mainstream thing, and it's how the audience is learning that habits change. And that's why I was always lifting up podcasts, because I could have a down month in terms of how good I felt the show is. But naturally, because of how technology evolves, you have a base that's always going to grow, because month over month, more people are going to see, wow, this is convenient. I have a computer in my hand. this is so easy. Why didn't I ever do this before? What took me so long? You still have a bunch of leaders of the old guard that are harder to break their habits. But you always will have that base of just technology evolving.
And if I may, just in terms of like why the show is so successful in my view, just as someone who has mostly been a listener to it rather than someone who's worked on it, I think Mike kind of hit on something, which is that when people go and find podcasts, very often they're trying to find a subject matter, and the people who host the show are a vehicle for the subject matter. I think that was the same case in sports, right? So sports talk radio used to be, this was the vehicle for people who talked about teams that I care about, and I got to listen to them talk about teams that I care about. What the Dan Le Batard Show has created is not a show that is a vehicle for the sports that they like. It is a show that is its own entity, that has its own characters. You buy its storylines. You buy listening to the show rather than listen to this vehicle for something else that I care about. And so surviving the media landscape, in my view, is that, right? Podcasts are people looking for the things that they care about. But you need to also buy into the characters and buy into the show, and that's why I think the show continues to grow. Is there is a constant addition of characters, and there is a constant kind of driving of this narrative that goes beyond having in Dan Le Batard a voice which can provide the definitive sports opinion of the day. So it's an all-encompassing beast, in my view.
That list of characters, one of the things that Nate told me was you have this new website you've just launched. Is that right?
Yeah, World of Suey. And if you ever want to get familiar with what we're doing, go to worldofsuey.com and you can find all sorts of history on the show. Angel Resto, our graphics designer, he started as a super fan. We have a nice little history of promoting from within. I myself started as a super fan, an emailer. I would email the show constantly. I would provide songs. I would write haikus. And the super fans that are creative typically find their way on the show. Chris told you he started as a listener and he found his way on the show. It has a funny way of doing that.
It's extraordinary. It's almost like a Marvel universe of characters that you've got here, and it's the website is so deep. There's so much stuff. It's amazing. I've been genuinely shocked by the discovery period of finding out about you guys. And I guess I was loaded initially with Dan's name being on the mast that I was thinking, that's what the show is. It's about this guy. And I got 3 or 4 pods in, and I don't think I'd heard his voice yet. And I was like, what's going on?
That's great.
And your promote from within, the fact that you two are even sitting here, that is very podcasty and not very traditional media-y, is it? That doesn't normally happen.
No. I mean, my experience within radio is there is a certain amount of, promotion from within. But yeah, I mean, at the scale that we're talking about, which was at the time biggest show in South Florida, then biggest show at ESPN, now biggest podcast, you would generally go on a nationwide search looking for the best people. But I do think there is an expression that is used on the show. I'm not sure if you've gotten to it yet, which is "you don't get the show," which is kind of like, for me, like the rallying cry of listeners of the show, which is you kind of have to understand what it is in order to really kind of embrace it and know how to operate within it. So I do think there's like a little bit of a fear of, if you bring someone in who doesn't get the show, as it were, would they be able to fit in? So I do think there's just kind of a certain amount of, hey, we have these people around here who get it. We have these people around here who love us and work really hard for us. And so let's go ahead and bring them in rather than looking for, this very best person and downloading them on the dynamics. I think that kind of natural organic growth has led to so many positive outcomes.
And to your point about Dan not really being featured on, you went through 3 episodes, and where's the title star? He is as unselfish as they come. He's the reason why this exist, and to lend his name and give us credibility as ensemble characters is sometimes be the unpopular person that has to stop the nonsense, because fans of our show just want nonsense. But I think what our show does is a perfect balance, thought-provoking conversation, especially given everything that happened over the last 4.5 years in America. We were bumping up against that. It's pretty well documented. There are plenty of people that are informed that would write that we left because we wanted to talk more about that stuff. So we'd get you in the tent with all these ridiculous stuff and the Stugotz character and making fun of his mom dying. Even though I don't like the way that sounds, but everybody has a role. Everybody
should
has
clarify
a role.
for people that don't know. That was an excuse, right? It was just a lazy stand-up podcasting. Couldn't be bothered to get something done. That was the excuse.
Yeah, he's good for a few excuses, but he's an unselfish, comedic gold mine in terms of writing for him and collaborating with him. The two hosts, they were the show. They would dominate the show when it first started, and now we have a very high head count. We have new voices in Chris Wittyngham and Jessica Smetana, who have been wonderful additions to our show, and we've always been our harshest critic. We've always want to cover up our blind spots before our listeners know them. We want to get younger. We want to get more diverse. We want to have more voices in there so we can speak to different life experiences. And it's a show about a show, and people have really gravitated towards it.
Chris, are you aware of your famous British namesake?
No.
Chris Whitty is our health minister.
Oh, really?
He has been the subject of 1 billion memes during COVID.
That doesn't sound very flattering.
Including raps and various songs and so on. I must make sure you get some, because when I was told I was speaking to Chris Whitty, I was like, huh? You should definitely look into that, because I think you've got a much stronger rep than he has.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm generally fairly downloaded on British culture, and somehow this one has passed me by. So I'm very upset with myself.
Oh, sorry, didn't mean to do that. Let me ask you, day one, when the call comes, the ESPN, whatever you want to call it, I guess. How long's the contract last that we can talk about it properly?
Yeah,
we'll talk about it in a year.
Let me get this one thing out there, though.
Yeah.
I'm eternally grateful that I got to work at ESPN, and it undoubtedly grew the show. And we learned from several mistakes. We learned what to do. We learned what not to do. We met many people along the way, and I'm most proud that we kind of changed the culture a little bit, brought diverse voices, and made a lot of stars with our star-making vehicle. Our show isn't what it is without the time that it had at ESPN. You have to have, our show always kind of needs a foil. Right now, we're kind of looking for one. You can't be anti-establishment from within the establishment if you don't have a great establishment to sort of make fun of. And I really appreciated our time over there. It was obviously time for us to end our journey over there mutually, but the show isn't what it is without ESPN making it the national phenomenon. Even though digitally we always were performing, with or without ESPN, it certainly took us up an extra notch.
So, Chris, you get the call. It's when are we? January?
Probably mid-December, late January is when the conversations began.
And Michael's sworn down that there's only one person he needs to execute this mammoth task.
Yeah, I believe the way that he put it in text was, "I'm not even asking you, I'm telling you, like you need to do this." Yeah, so I mean, basically the task was take this massive digital property and make sure it can stand up on its own two legs the day after it leaves ESPN. And in kind of research, I mean, I've worked on podcasts before, but nothing of the scale. And one of the things that you learn is that most podcast platforms are not capable of handling a show the size of the Dan Le Batard Show with Stugotz. So I went looking, and they go, maximum downloads, 600,000 a month. And I go, this show does 600,000 a day. How is that possible? It can't handle this. We have multiple podcasts to migrate. Am I going to create 5 separate accounts and migrate? So I did some research, and in the end, the solution that I came upon was the hosting service that we had already been using, that the show uses and that ESPN uses, a company called Megaphone. And so basically, we had a whole bunch of conversations, and the show needed to be migrated, from the ownership of ESPN's account to our own, which we now have. And really, the tension kind of came from, was this going to work? And the biggest priority was, Mike mentioned, we have this RSS feed, the Dan Le Batard Show with Stugotz, that has existed. I mean, I remember listening to the podcast of the show when I was in high school. I was like, 2008, 2009. The show was podcasted then. It was the most, ancient technology that was being used. I remember sitting at my iTunes on my computer for 12 minutes watching this thing download. And now it's obviously a click of the button. You can download it in 3 seconds on your phone. But either way, the subscribers and listeners, you talk about those legacy listeners. Not only are they legacy listeners, but they still listen, and so you want to make sure that you keep that in transitioning. And I couldn't really know. I researched everything, I looked everything up, but I couldn't really know until we did it. I was also panicked because I've read and I've heard that if an RSS feed has nothing on it, then Apple recognizes it as null and void. And so I was refreshing the Megaphone page. All right, when do I get owners? Because we were being handed a blank feed, right? So I needed to have something ready to post straight away, learning how the posting system works. If you don't do it, then you kind of have to figure it out. So eventually we got there, added advertising along the way, so I had to figure out how that works. And it was quite a Herculean task, but it's on its own two legs and it's up and running.
My man, Chris Whitty. And ESPN were actually pretty good partners outside of us completely wiping out the archive, which wasn't, the way that I would have personally chosen to do it. But those were the terms of our separation. It was fine. Outside of that, everything, they were class throughout the endeavor. They provided their best people on the digital side to help make this be a very smooth handoff, because it was in everybody's interest that it was an amicable split, and both parties were happy with how it went. So PG and Ryan over at ESPN really helped us out there. And for me, it always focused on the podcast, but always delegating that to someone who is skillful in that. I had a macro sense of things, but from did Liverpool just score over my shoulder?
They did.
I had a macro sense of it, but I knew I needed people that knew the nuts and bolts, because I care about our audience and our digital audience first and foremost. And I didn't want to come out of the box. My first impression after leaving ESPN and failing to deliver on their high expectations. And thank God, there's always going to be little hiccups along the way, little latency periods whenever you migrate something like that. But it was so clean, and my team just knocked it out of the park. I'm nothing without them.
The whole vehicle, the day that, okay, so you finished at ESPN. In theory, you've all got no job. Like there's a period between ESPN, you starting, and DraftKings appearing, or does that all happen in?
I'll take that one, Chris. We decided to bet on ourselves. So we negotiated buyouts, settlements. Like, we didn't get the money that was for the full term of our contract, but part of that negotiation was the RSS feed, obviously. I can't go too into detail about that, but yeah, we decided we wanted to keep our momentum, and we knew that if we explained to our audience, hey, the very next day, we're going to deliver to you a podcast the way most of you people always consume it, we'll figure it out. And that bet on ourselves really worked out, because we didn't lose any momentum. And I think we were able to think outside the box with where we would land once we settled on a destination during our free agency. I think we were thinking maybe more conventional partners. I know every industry writer was thinking a more conventional partner, and then DraftKings stepped up to the plate and kept this thing free. We didn't want to put it behind a paywall. We wanted our listeners to keep experiencing the show the way that they'd gotten used to. And DraftKings made that possible. We couldn't be more excited about being partnered with them. They're trusting us with the content. We hope to create even more content with them. This is really the first time they've been getting into the content game slowly with other acquisitions, but this is a fully formed machine that we have with Le Batard and friends. I have to praise Dan Le Batard, though, because that costs money, building out an infrastructure, keeping people paid despite being unemployed. Because we lost our benefits. We went on Cobra, and Dan reimburses us for our health coverage, paid a pocket to keep this thing going. He viewed everything as a down payment on a future investment, and we bet on ourselves, and the DraftKings thing happened, and it's a very happy ending. And thanks to John Skipper too.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, that's what. Dan brought John Skipper into our universe, and that is a great white shark of negotiating skill and incredible contacts, and he believed in what we did. And without him and without Dan, none of this. I mean, it goes without saying that the Dan Le Batard Show doesn't exist without Dan Le Batard, but he does things. I've seen how other hosts maybe they view producers as a transient position. It's very rare for a unit to stay like this. You don't get into this career because it's not really a career. This is a means to an end. This is so you can climb the ladder. But we've kept everybody. We're a family. And Dan knows that better than anybody. And he is the patriarch of the family in every sense of the word.
Who was the one that said, listen, guys, we need to keep that RSS feed. I don't care what else happens here. We need that feed. Someone had that idea. Someone said that. Who was it?
Yeah, that'd be me.
Yeah.
That'd be me. That'd be me because we kept it when we went over to ESPN. I honestly thought it would be a bigger deal. Thankfully, ESPN were great in the settlement, and they gave that to us. Maybe that won't be the case in the future because we really it was a big win for us. And yeah, it was important. If we were going to make a digital play like we were greasing the rails to, that was key for us. We couldn't start at zero, I felt, because we had a lot of positive momentum, and we kept it.
Chris, tell me about your mic.
My microphone?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's the commentator's microphone,
for sure.
Right? Yeah. It was one of those things where I was working at CBSSports.com at the time, and I was just kind of looking at, I need a home setup of some kind, and I've seen these. I just started researching them, and I got to the point, I was like, you know what? I'm going to pull the trigger. I'm going to buy this. I'm going to buy this microphone, and it's actually ended up working out because it actually helps with editing. Because it's genuinely a noise-canceling microphone. I'm moving it side to side across my mouth, and so you have to really talk into it. So, I love my commentating microphone.
It's great. It looks great. It's part of the part, isn't it?
Well, yes.
Chris Wittyngham is a proven broadcaster here in the United States. He has legitimate chops in calling soccer. It's ridiculous that Chris Wittyngham just jumped aboard and joined me. Well, I didn't really give him a choice as the outline.
Yeah, I was going to say you've got a team full of decorated people. And Chris, you know, when I was looking quick wiki on each of you, and I'm like, well, you just left. What happened? And then I listened to a few episodes. There's all sorts of talks. You have to excuse me because I've dotted around the playlist just so I got a spread of, pre-DraftKings, post-DraftKings, and everything in between. There's a guy, I can't remember who it was, that you were talking about. He still hasn't got a contract. He's just sort of he lurks around. Who was it?
Amin El Hassan.
Yeah, what's the deal?
There's Greg Cody too.
Is that
Greg
legit? Is that a legit thing that's going on? These are again just super fans, are they?
No. Amin is actually a former front office executive for the Phoenix Suns. He has it's absurd that. I don't know if you've seen Jerry Maguire, that scene where Jerry is about to leave the sports agency and he has a goldfish and Dorothy Boyd comes to his side.
Yeah.
We have about 7 Dorothy Boyds.
Amazing.
And Dan is the Jerry Maguire, and it's all a leap of faith. And I couldn't be honestly more honored that people did that with us because it's not an easy sell at all. And people are just truly putting their faith in us. And I hope they feel not necessarily immediately rewarded because this does, my creative juices are not squelched by any means. This is not a finished line, but it is the end of a chapter and we begin to write a new one. And this pirate phase really was exhausting. But we don't have the headcount, frankly, to maintain this output for much longer. We needed to grow. We were this fancy hood ornament on a company in Metal-Arc, which is a startup, and an infrastructure was building around us. That's not typically the way these things are done. And so the optics we're a lot further along than we appear because we have the #1 podcast. But there was a lot of learning on the job and a lot of sleepless nights and a lot of why am I doing this right now? Is this worth it? And everybody did it. And some people have gotten paid and some people are still negotiating like Greg Cody and Amin El Hassan.
It's amazing how part of the show all that is. Like it's, you talk about it being sort of, well, in my head, I call it an anti-sport show because even though it's obviously sports and is obviously your driver. All of you are decorated in the various fields for the various sports in which you talk about. Various people were regarded as some of the best in field at calling the various sports, and statisticians and all that type of stuff. Chris, you came up. I didn't want to blow it too much in your direction.
Yeah.
But that's quite an ensemble. What is, like, you know, this infrastructure that clearly you're still building? Is there a studio? How does that work? How do you record all this stuff?
Yeah, so the Clevelander Hotel on South Beach on 10th and Ocean is where ESPN built the studio for Dan's radio show and television show. And in the aftermath, I guess kind of ESPN recognized, well, if Dan's not going to be there, I guess we don't need this anymore. So they just kind of handed it over to us in part of the I was negotiated. I don't want to say handed, negotiated over. So that's where we work out of. And as Mike said, we've kind of had to build some things from within that to get functioning internet, to have functioning printers, have functioning boards and microphones and everything that you need.
Semi-functioning internet.
Yeah, the internet has been a bit dodgy at times, but the overall setup kind of originates from there. And I mean, just to kind of piggyback on the point, the Dorothy Boyd point, I love that. I love that analogy. We all just have a leap of faith in Dan, right? Like, even if we're not being paid now, we know, like, Dan had constantly says, you'll be taken care of, and he means it, and it's delivered on that on numerous occasions. So there's just like the utmost confidence that this operation will be everything that you would want to be as an employee, right? Like, it is the perfect place to work for, and that's why so many people are gravitating towards it.
How big's the crew now? How many of you are there in total?
On the show or at Meadowlark
No, like
Media?
the team. I think there's like 8 or 9 of you, isn't there, on the show?
On the show, I know the Zoom boxes are getting smaller. I know that. I think we got about 8 right now, and we have a lot of people that help us out on the social media side, which is something that you guys obviously take heavily into your algorithm. Our social media strategy is improved. We took some swings. We learned from mistakes made over at ESPN, mistakes learned from our early part of this pirate phase. We continue to evolve. We keep integrating video. We keep picking the brains of some really smart people. Juju Gotti, who was a fan of the show and a rapper from Atlanta who has a Greg Cody tattoo on his leg and has since gotten everybody's face tattooed on his person. He's another example of promoting from within. He was a very creative fan, and people gravitated to his social media accounts because he was really funny and he put a lot of show content. And we decided, Dan texted me one day, hey, let's try out Juju Gotti on social media. So we gave him a couple guest hits over the course of a year and a half, and we eventually hired him to run our social media. And Ryan Cortez helps out with video. So Ryan Cortez was an intern of mine, and it's all family. It's all people that were once fans that wanted to just give anything to be a part of that universe because they cared about it so much, and they found their way on the show.
So now you're growing. Now the expansion is way underway. Obviously, you've got a great set of backing behind you, presumably to roll this out as big as it can go. How do you keep that as these people come in? How do you? I mean, are you basically open calling to fans at this point, saying, "Look, guys, we need you"?
Not exactly. Well, Jessica Smetana is an example of that. She was someone that was on my radar. I wanted to. We had Allison Turner on our show. She remained at ESPN. I believe she's now with The Ringer and helping Bill Simmons' podcast out. I don't want to have a show that's talking about big, important societal issues, sports also. And we're talking about women's issues, and we don't have a woman on staff. Now, that wasn't a criticism. I think people gave us the benefit of the doubt. They'll figure it out. But I don't want to be that person that's ignorantly speaking about something that affects a portion of our audience without having that portion of the audience directly represented. And we've added Jessica, who did the Dorothy Boyd leap of faith. She was at Sports Illustrated. I thought she had a very high ceiling on the talent side. She was more of a producer, behind the scenes person. She was a writer. And we talked to her and she got the show. And that's the most important thing. You get me someone that gets the show, that gets the rhythm of it, that gets the humor. We'll build you out from there on. You'll catch up. And she's hit the ground running. She's been an excellent addition to the show. And everybody, Witty's already found a little bit of a character on the show. Stugotz, I'm sure, as you know, with the whole mom thing, has a character. And it's everybody's own individual personalities. And what Dan is so great as a host, Dan's the best producer on the show because he seizes on these personality traits that are very sticky with the audience. He stays there and you naturally amplify it. Yeah. And you have a great ensemble of all these mixtures and variables that blend so well with each other.
I was alarmed as someone new to the environment. Dan and I had like a 3-minute conversation before a show one day talking about just that thing, right? Seizing on personality traits and all that. And I am alarmed. We haven't really talked in depth about, hey, we'll do this and we'll do that and we'll build this out. And like, there's no Machiavellian master plan here. It's just, as Mike mentioned, Dan picking up on things and augmenting them, and all of a sudden we're away, right? And I'm like horrified that like I should have put more thought into how I was going to be portrayed, and Dan came up with something a million times better than I could have possibly come up with. Like, it is unbelievable how, even without giving that much of voice to it or speaking about it or planning it, how these things just magically come together. I think it's that kind of magic that people are so attracted to.
Is that not his thing though? Because none of you seem to be playing characters. You seem to be playing yourselves, but these characters are drawn out of you by, like you say, he finds that bit that presumably is going to work, and you hear it start to repeat in the shows, and you're like, okay, that's going to continue from here. You can see how that's going. I can almost see that on a t-shirt already. You know, like it's that sort of thing. When you have someone like that is controlling all of that without controlling it, is the impression I get. It's almost like it's naturally flowing for him. How do you multiply that? How does that get bigger? Because it's already a huge network, right?
It's tough to do on Zoom too. It was very tough to do on Zoom. As you just saw, people talk over each other. Now, granted, being on demand, it allows you to, hey, let's take a beat. Let's get this right. Yeah, we can do a pickup. So we're not overly produced in that respect, but the pressure's off. And I remember the first couple of times we were doing live radio and we were relying so heavily on Zoom. It was really hard. And it was easy to get frustrated because you don't want to have those awkward conversations where people talk over each other. We've added to our show. Jessica hopped on this moving train that has been fortified, a chemistry fortified over the course of 20 years. And she did it via Zoom. It is hard, but I think what makes it easy for us is we're very much a family. We have group texts. We like making each other laugh. We've had people from the outside in terms of this administrative arm really harness our energy because I'm a creative. I don't really want to spend time with the administrative and organizational aspects of it, though we sorely need it. So what do? We find someone that's really good at it. Carl Scott came over from Players Tribune and got us organized, and we had all this infrastructure, but it all harkens back to Dan. And unfortunately, Dan sometimes as a character of like being the not fun guy and it's not popular, but he is, even if he doesn't know it, he is the best producer in the history of sports talk radio and now sports podcasting, because not just the production within the show and talking it out subtly and subtly seizing on things and finding things funny, but it's also that loyalty that he has to you, that trust that builds up, that makes you want to lay it all on the line for this type of person. And it just makes you inherently a better producer because you don't want to let that person down. More than even your own personal achievements or your success or whatever, all that goes by the wayside. I just got to come through for Dan here. I don't want to let Dan down. I want to make Dan laugh. I want to make everybody laugh because that guy is the best ear. So if I make Dan laugh, I know that this is working for our audience. He knows what our audience wants better than the audience does.
I get the impression that's already happening in legacy form a little bit. Like the role you take on, Mike, and subsequently Chris. You seem to both embody that same method, that letting people grow rather than pushing them away, into a certain cast. Presumably that's how it amplifies, is he doesn't have to do all of it anymore. He's now got you guys who are well endowed in that process. That's presumably what happens next?
Yeah. We have an ensemble, and I actually like it when certain people take vacation days. We have at Metal Arc, there really isn't a PTO policy. Hey, you want off? Be off. Just make sure like the work is done. If it ever becomes a problem, I guess we'll have that conversation. I don't know, but we all have this trust, and it's great to actually, I like the challenge of working the offense through another person and someone getting increased reps. It's such an ensemble that you're just tuning in to experience the show. You have no idea what the show will be about. You have no idea who will even be on the show. That's always been the sticky part of the show. We have co-hosts. We had a rotation of voices. So I want just people tuning into the Dan Le Batard Show, and then it's an experience. And you can go several episodes without even hearing Dan or Stugotz, despite their names being on it. And I think that's how the hosts age with grace. That's how we continue building this culture. That's how we help launch other individual podcast properties, because over at ESPN, the Le Batard Show was such a digital monster. They allowed us to build out our own Le Batard and Friends network. And with that branding, we've been able to really get some sticky podcasts, whether it's with Stupidity, South Beach Sessions, Mystery Crate, or Hank Azaria lending us his brilliant Jim Brockmeyer podcast. And with announcements that we had with Tom Haberstroh and Kate Fagan today, we're only going to add to that Le Batard and Friends stable.
Yeah, I mean it's amazing to see. Obviously, I've picked this up very late, right? I'm just getting this now, but doing that quick dive into everything and seeing the enormous expanse of everything that was available. First thing I do is go back on Spotify, flick to the first episode. I'm like, February, this can't be possible. This is years and years and years worth, and sure enough, as I subsequently found out. Look, I'm mindful of keeping you too long, but we should probably get to the bit where we talk about your specific sports and which you affiliate to. Chris, what's your deal? You're a commentator, right? You call
Yes.
the MLS.
Yes.
Who do you support?
I'm from South Florida, so I'm a massive Inter Miami supporter. Although I will be working the national broadcast for their game this weekend, and I hope that even Chicago Fire fans who tune in on a Saturday on Univision won't know that I'm a supporter. I try and keep my biases, but look, man, like, I think, before I jumped on the Zoom, you and Mike were talking about how long the journey has been to have a South Florida's, football team to root for. So we have one. And I'm absolutely delighted in doing so. But yeah, so, I work in MLS. I've done a bit of NWSL. I work some South American competitions. There's a bunch of sports that are on various platforms here in the States. And so whatever I can get my hands on in terms of commentary, as much as I love working on this show, my co-favorite thing to do in broadcasting is commentate matches, and I have a great deal of fun with it.
Oh, I thought he was going to say Chelsea mic'd up. This would have been such a great
And I love producing podcasts. Do you have a Premiership club? Or is it Chelsea?
Yes.
Do you have to say that?
Yes, I have a Premiership club. I do.
Who is it?
I have a Premiership club.
He is the neutral observer. But if I could, I lay a couple of Easter eggs on Chelsea mic'd up. Let's just say the Champions League final is going to be very interesting.
And Mike, you are co-host of the official Chelsea US pod, right?
Yes, co-host with Chris Wittyngham. That was wild. We were in the UK. It was sort of just things just happen when you care passionately about something.
The serendipity of that, like, we don't talk nearly enough about like just how crazy it is that we planned a UK football vacation as friends, and this is what came of it. Yeah, that I because of my status with the show, I was one of the more high-profile Chelsea fans on social media, at least here in the States. And I just so happened to be at the UK. They asked for a reaction video to Christian Pulisic's signing, which was massive for American fans everywhere, especially those that supported Chelsea. And we did the video, and they were happy with it. And they started a dialogue began between this company Gilt Edge that was representing the club. The club wanted to have an official podcast as a means to grow the brand here in the United States. And from a trip amongst friends throughout UK for the festive fixtures and a whole lot of beers at the darts, we, after a couple of months, became voices for a Chelsea podcast, which took evolutions. It was going to be a video series just by myself. And then they were like, hey, Mike,
And keep in mind, this is after I just built a podcast network over at ESPN. How'd you like to do a podcast? It's like, it'd be the last thing on the planet that I want to do. I don't have any bandwidth to do another podcast.
But when your club calls.
No, but even then, I was like, I'm not doing it unless you hire
Chris Whitty.
Oh God!
And then it makes it a lot easier.
I'm uncomfortable with how much you praise me, Mike.
I was going to say,
much.
I can imagine Mike going to buy a car, and the salesman going, just sign here, and he goes, just hang on 1 minute.
Yeah,
Chris Whitty.
Well, it's a family thing. I'm starting. I'm in my mid-30s now. I was 18 years old when I started on the show, and over the course of several years, I built up a trust and that kind of relationship with Dan, where Dan trusts me implicitly, and I don't take that for granted. And I needed a right hand in life, and Chris Wittyngham has gotten me out of many jams, and I've forced several people to hire Chris Wittyngham, and hopefully I can continue to do that to repay him for the rest of my career.
Chris, are you the tech?
Yes.
Physical tech as well as the digital delivery tech.
Yeah. No, I've got, and it's funny because it's all self-taught, right? Like I was working at the University of Miami.
Self-taught. You were my intern. I taught you everything you know.
Sorry, yeah, Mike taught me everything. Yeah.
No, I like just like the podcast equipment. Obviously, like the content production. I learned from the Le Batard Show a million times over, and Mike was kind of the instrument that most kind of put me on that. But like in terms of like the raw technical stuff, like I was working at the college radio station at the University of Miami, and I got put in a position. I was running the sports department there. We had broadcasts all over the country, and they'd call and be like, "Hey, it's not working." And I go, "What's not working?" And we'd have to figure it out together. And so from there, I kind of like just developed this brain for kind of figuring out technical issues and how to put audio broadcasts together and then podcasts, and I just try and read as much as I can, and I've kind of ended up learning about hosting and equipment and how to make things sound as good as possible. So yeah, I've kind of taken on that role almost kind of purely as like I really like this. It really it's not in keeping at all with being a quote talent, right? Like being a commentator or a host or whatever, but I've just always kind of taken to it, and so I really enjoy it.
Let's talk about video then. When does this turn into a studio-based, you guys sitting around film show? Because it obviously lends itself that way, right?
Yeah, we've done a couple of Twitch broadcasts as a totally independent pirate ship. We did that for several years.
Song.
Thanks. We did it for several years over with ESPN, and having video is huge for social media and engagement. And we have clips out there. We record on the Zoom, and we have our graphical aesthetic attached to it, and those perform very well. But yeah, we'll be announcing something. When does this podcast drop?
When do you want it to drop?
Well,
we're going to drop so we can talk about it.
We're going to be doing if it drops after tomorrow, then I think we're good.
It's going to drop after tomorrow.
All right. We're going to be announcing a 24-hour marathon to kick off properly our partnership with DraftKings. 24 hours of Le Batard and friends on the air together as a sort of relaunch. The marching band to nowhere finally gets somewhere, and it just so happened to be the same place they were always at. But yeah, we're going to be doing that, and that'll be on digital video. And it may not be flipping through your cable package and finding us like you used to when we were on ESPN News. There's a lot of new media out there.
I was going to say, I've got news for you. People don't watch cable TV anymore.
Yeah, we're so the way that we were ahead of it on digital audio, maybe we weren't as ahead of it on digital video, but we're bringing people aboard. Very talented people that can help make us leaders there as well. We would do more of it, quite honestly, but we didn't have the bandwidth for it, and that's multi-pronged. We didn't have the bandwidth for it personally because we have a certain standard, and we didn't have the bandwidth for it.
Literal internet bandwidth.
Yeah, we didn't have internet bandwidth to do it, so we're building out that infrastructure. That infrastructure took a little bit longer than the audio infrastructure because, like I said, with post-production, the audience doesn't have to hear it when the Zoom craps out. But if you have people watching and the Zoom craps out, that's problematic. So we're building that out. And the first weekend of June, get ready for 24 hours of the Le Batard Show.
And where does that go out? I'm assuming this
out.
isn't Chris, by the way, pulling HDMI cables now.
No,
as well
no. Stay tuned. Follow at Le Batard Show on our social media channels and find out where exactly you can find that.
Great. Oh, well, it will have happened by then. So well done. It was an amazing show. Honestly, 24 hours. You really did create history. And just so you know, the numbers were off the chart.
Yeah.
So DraftKings, are they a sports book, or is it fantasy league, or what do they do?
Daily fantasy, and they have migrated over to sports books in the states that it's legal. It's obviously very complicated here in the United States. Individual states have their rules. They're available in Pennsylvania, Indiana, and hopefully several other states. But yeah, they are daily fantasy leaders. They own the market when it comes to
and they're starting to own the market as well on the sportsbook game, particularly like the mobile sportsbook game. Look, in Vegas, they've got obviously massive sports books there, but in terms of the states where it is becoming legal, because of the daily fantasy, they were building out an infrastructure of users that have now slowly been converting over to the sportsbook. I am currently vacationing in a state where it is legal, so I'm wagering on DraftKings Sportsbook, and like it's incredible how seamless that experience is. It's just, all right, you have an account, put some money in, and you're away. So yeah, I mean, DraftKings is rapidly ascending as one of the biggest sports books in the country.
I'm saying the sports media landscape here in the United States is changing. If you either wanted to work for ESPN or NBC or Fox, but now daily fantasy is getting into the content game, and this DraftKings thing really opened the industry's eyes that, oh man, we don't need a traditional media partner. We can build out our own infrastructure, and someone can step up to the plate the way that DraftKings did. And I heard from so many creatives within the industry, and they were just saying, thank you. Thank you. You set a bar, you opened up a door to a whole new industry. Now we've got sportsbook money entering the content game. This is a whole new frontier for the way things are done.
There's this thing in American sports, right, where in England you support a football team. That's it. It's very unlikely that you also support a rugby team and also support a cricket team. In fact, it doesn't happen. In the States, everyone seems to have a baseball team, a basketball team, a football team. Like, you have your team. What gives? What's different there?
Maybe the television product and the talking heads. I'm not exactly sure why we have the bandwidth to follow so many professional sports teams, because we obviously follow every single game of English football too. We have our English football clubs. We follow. There's a load of competitions there, from the academy to the women's team. I follow it all when it comes to Chelsea Football Club, but I'm also a diehard Cleveland Browns fan and Miami Hurricane season ticket holder. And Chris Wittyngham calling Inter Miami games while I'm getting drunk in the stands. So, like, we have Miami Heat. I don't know if it's an American thing. I think you guys over in the UK have the bandwidth to support an NFL team. It looks like you're gearing that way anyways.
They're trying to gear us that way. Trust me, there's a whole load of them that play in my stadium, and I have never looked at it once. I think you can buy a Harry Kane shirt with in an NFL style. I think that's the closest I've seen to it. I
don't know if you can continue buying a Harry Kane shirt in that stadium.
As I said that, as it came out of my mouth, I was like...
Right, okay. And Mike was like ready to pounce the second it came out of your mouth.
That is, thanks very much. Guys, thanks so much. I've got a million things I'd like to ask you. I could honestly, I've got several strands of this. Maybe we'll pick this up in 6 months' time once the whole video side's relaunched and you're immovable from number one on the pod board, because all of a sudden people are scraping YouTube as well. Good luck with that 24 hours. It sounds a truly you guys way of announcing yourselves into that arena.
It may kill us, but we're going to do it. Or if you're listening to this, it did kill me.
Yes, quite. This is the last interview. Now. Yeah. I should, before I let you go, I need to just hit you with the stats they gave me, just in case you didn't know them. You were the number one sports pod in the US 23 times since you guys launched. That's in all of the sports of any of the various things. But more importantly, you spent 21 days outside of the top 20 of all pods, as in over everything, which is obviously insane. And you're seeing big growth in India and Canada at the moment from a conversational perspective, which I didn't know if you knew, but those guys always get some interesting bits that perhaps you don't see. I'm going to get them to send you your back-end stats. I don't know if you've seen them yet, have you?
I've not. I would love any stats that you guys have. That's why we said yes. That's why we said yes. We give us your intel.
We're building a system so you guys can actually see where your conversations are happening, what social media platforms are lighting up over what topics and all that type of stuff. But we'll make sure we get you the logs in for those.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. It helps us direct the future of the show.
I've got one more thing, Chris. You stole our national treasure in what should be Sir David Beckham. Is he on your friends and family list yet?
I wish, but unfortunately not. I have had, I would say, 2 occasions in which he was, conducting like press conference sessions in which I was stood next to him and looked him in the eye, and that's really all I need. I'm good. I'd love to be on Friends and Family. If you're listening, David Beckham, then, I'd be happy to. But you know what? I see him on the training ground every now and again. He's a very involved owner, by the way. Like, he is out there every single day. He's at every single game. He's been, I think, he's had an increased influence this year, and it's been great, I think, for the club. And it's really cool to see David Beckham on regular occasion, and I get the opportunity to.
He's my only starstruck person in my life. I used to be a DJ, quite used to meeting famous people. Doesn't really faze me. Went with a buddy of mine when we were at university to have David Beckham sign a copy of his Game Boy Advance game at some record store. Queued for 3 hours, got to the front of the queue, and I am faced with him standing there, and I'm holding the game, and he says, "Great, what do you want me to write?" And nothing came out.
Wow.
And I just stood there and I looked at him and he looked at me like I was a weirdo and scribbled his signature on the box and sort of had me moved along. And I was like, oh no, I can talk to anyone. And now the one person I wanted to talk to, and there you go. You can make that right for me one day.
I shall. I'll work on it.
Thank you. Guys, again, good luck with that 24 hours. I can't wait to see the results of it. And we'll definitely catch up with you when we're in Miami for PodiCon. Love to see you guys on stage.
All right. Thank you for having us.
Cool.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.